Hello, I'm Matthew Steinke, and thank you for visiting my YouTube channel. If you don't know, I review movies because that's what I do best. Today we're going to be reviewing Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I have my notes here with me, so let's get to it. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark was directed by Andre Overdahl, and the plot revolves around four teens in 1968 who sneak into their town haunted house and find a book of scary stories. They accidentally unleash the vengeful spirit who owned the book, and then have to find a way to stop the spirit before it murders their friends. What I like to do in reviews is get right to the positives. Number one, the costumes. The costumes in this film are fantastic. Using practical suits that actors can actually be in really add a sense of realism and danger to the monsters in this film. They each have their own distinct style that really characterizes them and makes the monsters memorable. Whenever they're on screen, you're looking right at the monsters, and that is a huge plus to the film. And I don't think that CGI would have done any better compared to the actual costumes that they use, because they reflect the terrifying Stephen Gammell drawings from the book right onto the screen, and it's fantastic to look at. Number two, the visuals. The visuals are also fantastic and give the film its own distinct style. During the Pale Lady sequence, vibrant reds fill the hallways, flickering on and off, and the camera moves with the same frantic and scared and desperate energy that the character's feeling, weaving around tight corners and staring down intimidating hallways. The camera work and the visuals in this film are spectacular. Number three, the suspense. It's very rare nowadays that in horror films you get suspense, and this film does suspense very well. The sequences are nail-biting, and you're sitting on the edge of your seat wondering how the certain scene is going to end. You don't know if they're going to pop around a corner or if they're going to be right behind the character, and it's great. The tension is palpable, and the suspense is a mounting dread that you really want to see what the conclusion is, and it's fantastic. I love suspense. Suspense is why I go to horror movies, because suspense makes the scares work, and this film had wonderful suspense. Now, as much as I love talking about the positives of a film, we gotta get into the negatives. Number one, the payoffs. Remember how I said that the suspense was really good? It is good. The build-ups are fantastic. The dread is there, and it makes you want to see the payoff. And unfortunately, the payoffs aren't as good as the suspense. It usually ends with a jump scare. And while jump scares aren't bad, I really respect and appreciate a good jump scare. These films jump scare in a way that I don't like. It feels kind of cheap to me. Instead of respecting the amount of suspense that was built up, it kind of throws it away in use of a cheap tactic to me. And like I said, jump scares can be perfectly fine if they're built up well, and there is one good jump scare in the film that really works with the suspense, but the rest of them are more surprise instead of suspense. And I don't really like that. I've never really liked that, and it's something in modern horror films that I just really can't get behind. People confuse being scared with being startled, and unfortunately this film isn't really going to change the minds and perspectives of the people who feel that. Because being jump scared and being scared are completely two different things. They're on the opposite ends of the spectrum. And unfortunately, I was hoping that this film would end off its fantastic suspense with a fantastic payoff, and instead it really just went with the jump scare route, which kind of disappointed me. But otherwise, the suspense is really great, and the payoffs, they just didn't work that well. Number two, the screenplay. It is very hard to write a horror movie screenplay, because when you're writing a horror movie screenplay, there are two things you can focus on. One, making the characters and plot as good as they can be, or number two, making the scares as good as they can be. And unfortunately, in most horror films cases, you either do one and forget the other, and this film sadly tried to do both, and it ended up not working well in either case. The characters in this film have cliched backstories, and while I salute the director for trying to come up with a backstory for its characters, something original I think would have fared better in this film. We've had a lot of characters who have a missing parent or their parents have died, and unfortunately this is the same cliche that has been used many times in the past to try and build character. And like I said, I salute him for trying to build character, because so many films nowadays, they don't even try. But unfortunately it didn't work out. The story as well seems kind of convoluted to me. Things that are the main plot points and are the center of the story don't really make sense to me. There's a lot of things that are left out that could have been explained better, and sadly, the things that they do explain don't make much sense either. And that's also a good segue into how they treat the more interesting characters in this film. The more interesting characters in this film are basically exposition machines. Their jobs are to give the backstory on every single character and every single situation, and sadly that takes away from the good moments that we've had with the character and regulates them to a more non-important role that really, really, really makes the character seem not as important. The screenplay also, it seems to not, it has kind of trouble finding its footing with its tone. There are several instances where they're picking a specific tone and then they switch to a different tone. And while comedic elements are not that bad, some points of the film rely too much on comedic elements, and the other points of the film are straight, in your face, trying to be scary. And unfortunately those didn't blend well together. And it made a strange kind of Frankenstein-esque tone. And while that's not really as apparent as the struggles with the character and the story, it still left an impact on me, and it's something that I can't not talk about. Now, those were the negatives and the positives. And as a recap really quickly, let's talk about what I just said. The positives, the costumes, the visuals, and the camera work are fantastic, but most importantly, the suspense. I love suspense. You know, suspense is great. It really elevates you and keeps your attention on the screen. But sadly, that suspense is drowned out by the jump scares. The jump scares don't fit well. It either is a loud noise, or spooky face, or a combination of a loud noise and a spooky face. And instead of working with the suspense, they clash together and repel either one like a magnet. And sadly, it doesn't work. The story also seems to falter and struggle a bit. And while, like I've already said, it's hard to write a story that can nail every single point, I think this film could have just done a little bit better. For the ending, I'd like to just read word for word my conclusion, because I think it sums up my, thoughts on the film pretty well. You might be listening to this review and saying, "Matt, why so harsh? It's meant for teenagers, not for the Cannes Film Festival. Why be so cruel to a fun movie you watch on Halloween night?" Well, I'll tell you. We've had so many films in these past few years that fall under this genre of teen horror. You know, horror films that could be a gateway into the genre for younger viewers. It pays homage to the old Amblin films of the 80s, such as Gremlins and E.T., films that blended scary and funny very well while still keeping that sense of childhood innocence. Movies that revolve around kids and teens getting into real danger and facing consequences for their actions. While this idea itself isn't reprehensible at all, I love a good homage, it fails to replicate that same feeling that I got while watching those old films. It feels tired, uninspired, and kind of cliched, doing exactly the opposite of what those Amblin films did. The films they're trying to replicate pushed boundaries and explored intense subject matter with the finesse that left you still feeling like you had had fun at the end of the movie, even if you had gotten a bit scared. This film doesn't feel like it's trying to inspire young viewers to get interested into horror. Feels like it's trying to make a quick buck in some certain instances. And that's one part of show business that I really don't like. Don't get me wrong, I don't like writing negative reviews. I love positive reviews. I love when a film makes me want to go home and talk as much good about it as I can and promote it in the most wonderful and inspiring ways possible. But this film, it's kind of hard to find inspiration. I probably won't write a review as long as this again. The reason that this review is so long isn't an attack against the film, because it's not a bad film. It just made some mistakes that I feel costed it the respect that I think it could have garnered. It's not a bad film per se, it just could have been so much more. And I think that's what really disappointed me. When new teen horror films come out each year, I go to them with the same thought in mind. The thought of not only how it may inspire me, but how it may inspire the millions of other aspiring filmmakers sitting in the audience. I always go in hoping for the absolute best, but I usually come out exactly how I did tonight, disappointed and kind of worried. And this made me think about a problem that Hollywood has no impulse to fix. I was disappointed in how much the film let me down, and worried about how this would impact the future of the genre. As horror movies flood the theaters each year, the quality seems to falter more and more. Studios rely more on box office than on inventive and thought-provoking ideas. Jump scares rule the cinema, and smartly written and filmed horror films fall more and more into the indie category, being forgotten or barely noticed at all. And as I see these things, I look around me in the theater and see all these kids watching them. Any one of these kids could be the next Lucio Fulci or Mario Bava or John Carpenter. And as these films are continually being pumped out, examples of good horror are being lost. Those aspiring directors can't see what a good horror film looks like, and how a horror film can use absolutely everything at its disposal to make an unsettling and memorable film. I want these people to see what a true horror film can be. Now, I have lost a bit of hope. I want them to see how it can not only scare, but inspire us in ways we could never imagine. And nowadays, there aren't many horror films that really do that. I hope that this changes soon, that someone makes a film that revolutionizes the genre of horror and takes us back to a different time. A time where what we didn't see was far, far scarier compared to what we do. But I guess for right now, I'll just have to wait a while longer. I'll give Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark a 2.5 out of 5. For what we got, it's okay, but it could have been so much more. Thank you for watching my review, and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to. I'd really appreciate it. Put down in the comments what you'd like me to review next, and as always, thanks for checking it out. Go see movies in the cinema, because they need your help. Bye-bye.